have the pleasure of the company of Mr. Howard Middleton Jones here. Mr. Middleton Jones was born in Gower in 1946, I think it was.
Now it's all out.
He spent most of his life residing in the area. He also spent many years as a nature reserve warden on Gower. And we both have something in common, in that we both trace our family heritage back to Scandinavia, and we were both part of the original surfing scene back in the late 60s and 70s, if I remember rightly. Anyway, Howard was university educated, where he studied veterinary science, classics, ancient history and archaeology. He's a BA honours degree in ancient history and Egyptology, and if I've got any of this wrong, I do apologise to him now. For over 30 years, he studied and researched the Giza pyramid complex near Cairo in Egypt, to where he's been a frequent visitor, and he's written many books on this and other subjects. He has many years' experience in presenting illustrated talks on archaeology, Egyptology, Coptic studies and current affairs in Egypt. Well, tonight he'll be talking about Ambilac, the solar anomalies team, the possibility of cosmic travel, the Fermi paradox, and his own UFO sighting in Swansea. Now, if the meaning of any of these subjects are alien to you, excuse the pun, then hopefully you'll be fully enlightened by the end of the evening. So please give a warm welcome, put your hands together for Mr. Howard Middleton Jones.
That's great. Okay, I'll stand in the corner a little bit.
Yeah, I mean.
Halfway, then I might sit down after the rest of it. I'm hoping my voice is going to carry on tonight. It started university term yesterday. I spent 3 or 4 hours last night non-stop talking until I get into the swing of talking in vocal cords, so I'm sure it'll be alright though. Great, well, thanks for the introduction. Where did you dig all that information up?
Oh, can't say.
Talking about Egypt before I start, I've been going there for over 20 odd years, and the last 10 years I've been visiting, because I teach Coptic studies, which is the archaeology and culture of the early Christian period in Egypt, following on from the late Pharaonic to the Arab invasion in 600. I used to stay in cave hermitage with the monks in the Western Desert, and we've seen some really unusual sightings there, because every night you see something. You just sit out, they've got these deck chairs in the desert, and you sit out and it's just like a star show. There's no light pollution, you have like 100 miles from the nearest anywhere. And you just see millions and millions of stars, and after a few days you get used to where these stars and planets are, and you often see some very unusual formations. And the monks used to tell me every 3 weeks there'd be a light show on the plateaus a mile away. Unfortunately, we never saw that. They never could understand what it was, but it was vertical light shafts coming down and bouncing up. So that was quite interesting. So there's lots of things going on. I call this tonight a journey through space and time, because exactly is what we're going to do, through the space and our own and other times. And I'll introduce you to some characters. Unfortunately, most of them have gone beyond now the last couple of years. As far as the solar anomaly group we set up in '98, I'm one of only 2 left now at 14. They've all passed on, some naturally and some with question marks. Gary Goodwin is the only one left in America. I was the only one in Europe. Most of the others from Australia or Canada and America. That's why I did a lot of work in Canada for a few years. But I'll talk about that later. I'm going to talk about a number of subjects. I'm going to talk about Ambilac's a weird word, but Emlyn asked me earlier on how do we think of that word. And Jim, who's now RIP, a couple of years ago, in '98 was thinking, what should we call the Canadian research team? And he leaned back from his desk and a book fell on top of his head, and he opened it and said Ambilac, the first word, so that was good as any. So we called it Ambilac CA, and now it's Ambilac UK. I'm going to talk a bit about the moon. I don't know if you know about the theory, it says theory, but I'll give you evidence to back that up from not only current spaghetti Western guys, but also from ancient sources, how the moon was actually towed into position as a natural stability for the Earth. And then talking about the solar anomalies team that we set up in '98, quite a very rare group, there's 14 of us, and some of them you might have heard of. if you've been involved in this for a number of years. But as I say, it's closed down now, unfortunately. There are much younger groups taking over this, and they're doing a lot of work now, courtesy of Soho and LASCO satellite telescopes circling millions of miles up in the atmosphere there. And then I'll talk about my I call it close encounter, because it really was a close encounter in 1965 over Singleton Hospital for about half an hour. It was more than lights. Pity I didn't have an iPhone or cameras in those days, no digital, I'm afraid. We'll look into that. And then I'll probably have a break till I've done solar anomalies. You'll probably get a bit really bored by then, but I've got lots of photographs and illustrations so you can, a little flash unit. And then the Fermi paradox. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's just a theory by old Fermi some years ago, talking of why aren't we seeing as many aliens or unidentified flying objects? Why aren't we seeing them every day? And why aren't they coming or visiting? Well, as far as we know, there may be. And why don't we see them? And this is where the time and comes into. I started one of my talks I gave in Canada. We called it Sands of Time, our point of origin. You know, where do we originate from on this planet, and maybe Mars before that, and that hence the moon. And I'll talk about that later. But we're all built up of frequencies and vibrations. And you only have to veer away from that small vibration and we dissolve or dematerialize. And that's what it's all about, the resonance and vibration. And Nikola Tesla, famous guy, he wanted to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency and vibration. We all know what happened to him, poor chap. Going to our Ambilac research. Well, the two guys that were involved before me, I joined in '98. These are the teams, myself, but there were others, but these were the three main teams. It was James Wilkie, died about 3 or 4 years ago, and Jan Murter. Jan Murter died about 2 or 3 years in Czechoslovakia. He used to be the safety officer for Canada. I've lost count how many PhDs. He's had about 15, he's about 30 degrees. He was put forward in 1982 as the most accomplished man in the world by the Guinness Book of Records. He's in 18 Who's Who books, or was. What he did know, this guy, he was also a psychic, was no one's business. But he and Jim worked a lot on the vibrations and frequencies in the Great Pyramid. And it was Jan who stayed for a couple of nights when you could stay in the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid to conduct experiments. And if you go to I've got a little paper card, I've run out of my other cards, but if you go to ambilacuk.com, you'll find some pictures of Jan in the pyramid and the sound experiments they did there back in, I think about 79. Jan was also involved in the early days with NASA. NASA called him in. It was at a time, I think it was about 81, when Uri Geller was about 17, so work it out, something like that, 16 or 17. Uri Geller and Jan independently were asked by NASA, along with many other psychics and other psychic engineers and electronic specialists. They were receiving some signals, is what Jan was telling me, from Mars, but they couldn't interpret them. And so they got in highly qualified engineers, innovative engineers, they got in psychics, and all they did was sit in front of these screens day after day, trying to analyze these psychically and otherwise, these signals. And Jan was telling me that Yuri was totally out of control when he was 16. So of course things have changed now. He's gone a bit to this drama thing, you know, with the TV. But Jan was telling me he did have some kind of ability, and it was so strong when he was younger that the NASA engineers had to insulate all the machines. He couldn't walk into a room because they'd all go haywire, you know. So something was there somewhere. What happened in his later life, I'm not quite sure. He just lost that or whatever. But those are the two guys. They spent a lot of time. Jan died very suddenly. He wasn't very old, in his late 50s, 62 I think when he died. Unfortunately, a great man, but such a loss, and he was forgotten immediately. two of the books, these are two of the books we first came out in '99 and reprinted in 2001. 2 volumes, Giza Genesis, that went down quite well. It's looking at not just the pyramids of Giza, but how the whole layout affects as above as below. So the star formations, and basically whoever constructed it, we think we did, but we were more advanced at the time, and we think it was more like 28,000 years ago rather than 6,000 years. And there's a lot of evidence coming forward for that later time, and possibly built on top of an older construction. So they came out, and we knocked, I think in 2002 we knocked Stephen King off the top 60 in Amazon for 1 week only, but at least it was something. Then he went back in the top 20 again, but we were on quite a few radio shows in those days. I was saying to Evelyn earlier on, things were very popular in the sort of 2002, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then it started sort of easing off. People had too many other things to cope with, too many other serious events, especially after Iraq 2 and so on. People had to cope with all this news blasting that we get. We also did the sounds of the pyramid. This is from Jan's experiment, and it's quite interesting. The idea that it shows you that whoever constructed the inside of the pyramid, you couldn't even put a razor blade between the 2 granite blocks. Each block emitted a certain frequency, and now that frequency has been altered because when Zaki Was was in charge, he'd been ousted now, of course, as a Minister of Antiquities. He tried to find out what was below. He was basically looking for the Hall of Records, and publicly he said they didn't exist, but privately he asked Jim and a few other people to come and help him out. And because he blasted into the ground floor of the chamber, he altered the frequency and the whole meaning of what that chamber was about. If you want to ask me questions later on about that, or at any time, we'll have a discussion at the end as well. Just feel free to shout at me. We also did this large talk in Canada some years ago. When was it? 2003, was it? Mm-hmm. That went down quite well at the time. It was looking at how that Edward Casey, when he said the Hall of Records was on the paw of the Sphinx, he didn't actually mean it. You go to the paw and you dig under there. When you reverse the star charts, you'll find there's an exact alignment. It's too complicated to get into it now, but basically, if you reflect that, there's an area some miles away that actually is the paw of the Sphinx when you bring it upside down. So that was on the DVD. So again, in case as above as below. During our time in 98, 99, we built up a lot of contacts with current and ex-military, retired people, government contractors and private contractors and local university and private institutions. And around about 2000 to 2003, they were quite happy to share information. That was soon put a stop to. When we had the Ambilac Canadian site going, we were getting about 300,000 or 400,000 hits a week. And that was quite a lot for those days. It is for now, actually. And then about 300 or 400 a day, because we could track where they were coming from, were mainly military contractors looking in, all under the guise of transportation, nuclear facilities, you name it, and they were looking in. For what purpose at the time, we don't really know. And I remember we gave a talk at university, about 100 people turned up from all around Britain, and of course a couple from Canada. It was about our findings on the Giza Plateau, and we were trying to get some, I think it was about 2002 or 2003, that one, and we tried to get some illustrations sent down from our illustrator in Winnipeg in Canada, and we had several days trouble with communication, and then my website went down for 2 weeks. I couldn't get anything off it, I could go to a public library, I can access it there. I'm just trying to give you a good example of what lengths at the time certain people went to. But I couldn't access it on any ACUK address or at my home address. I had a technician who was very keen on this sort of thing, and he said, at the university, I'll track it for you to see what's happened. And he rang me up 2 days later. He said, I'm ringing you up because I'm not emailing you because we were on Pegasus mail in those days, the DOS mail system. He said, it's interesting that I tracked the blockage comes from a public library terminal in New York, and it's a NASA address. So obviously they were using, they go to all these lengths of using terminals, nodes everywhere around the country. And you couldn't go any further than that. We said, whoever's blocking you, it's obviously some either military or government organisation. 2 weeks later, he was on the sort of on the verge of the fence about UFOs, but I think after related information. But 2 weeks later, we had another case where my computer at home, all the files went missing and then put back again all over the place. And we were on dial-in service in those days. And he checked it again, and he got really interested because he said, you've got NASA, sorry, not NASA, the Vatican banging on your door. I said, what's the Vatican got to do with my work? And it's all to do, a week before that, I sent, we discovered something related to a show we did, the Coast to Coast, years ago. And we said that the guy in the Vatican would be interested in this, and we sent him the information. And then the Vatican knocked on my door to see what I had. So they're knocking in all the time, and that was many years ago. So I'm sure that, I think they gave up by about 2008. It was all very quiet. But that's the sort of thing we had to put up with at the time. Interesting. And I also lost my, I was doing an MPhil in Egyptology, and I had to give that up because someone listened to a program in, I was at home giving it, but it was recorded in Canada and America. Some research student in California University, sponsored by NASA, rang up Prof. Lloyd, who was in charge of the department, and said, you can't have someone from university talking about this sort of thing. And even though I never said I was from university, and it ended up me handing in my notice for the MPhil. They said they didn't have it. And they tried to actually get me to say I was a poor teacher, but I had so many positive from the students and the staff that they gave that one up. So it's all sorts of little bits of snippets of information like that makes life hard going. Okay, let's go back to the moon. I mentioned earlier on there's a possibility that this was towed into position 50,000 years ago, I understand. But we'll have a look at some of the evidence to show that. You're all familiar probably with the Learjet and John Lear. You've heard of John Lear. We were very friendly with John back in 99, 2001, 2002. One of his jobs, Jim knew him quite well. One of his jobs was to fly his father sort of invented, if you like, the Learjet. And the CIA used quite a few of these jets quite regular. And John was a pilot, so he used to pilot these CIA guys everywhere. And he was told on one of the missions that the moon was totally in position, and that's where his interest in UFOs and although he had an interest prior to that, but he really got down to it and wanted to find out more. So he was told that 50,000 years ago, is what he told us anyway, they told him he was totally in position, and they were involved with people, the remnants of the people from those days. They were involved in talks back in 96 and onwards. This is the sort of jet he was flying at the time. They've improved now, there's a lot of new ones. The idea was, and from what our work, that the idea of the towing the moon into position was that originally, long before about 50,000 years, we were on planet Mars. This is the story that was told. And we had, because of an incoming asteroid, the planet they assumed was going to be moved out of orbit. So the nearest planet to move to was Terra, planet Earth, and so steps were involved to bring us forward, and that meant bringing in another stability rock, if you like, and they brought in the moon. And that was the idea behind that. It's a very complicated story, but I've got a lot of information on it. If you ever, I can email you some if you like. So just a little bit about John there, so you give it a bit of a background. He flew a lot of secret missions for CIA, Central Southeast Asia and South America between 66 and 83. He had 17 world records, including speed around the world in the jet, set in 66. And he presented with this award for outstanding airmanship in 68 and the Simmons Wave Memorial. And he was the youngest, another thing on his list was that the youngest American climber the Matterhorn in Switzerland. It's something I always wanted to do. And in 1970 he's owned the skipper of the America's Cup boat. So he's quite a checkered history and quite a varied character, really. So that was his information from the CIA and the NSA. So looking at it, let's go back much further now and look why we think this may have been the case. Velikovsky, a famous writer, I think the 40s, 50s, talked about the moon, apart from many other things. He got his information from various Platonic sources, dated 500 BC, and he wrote in one of his chapters in the book about this. Aristotle wrote that in a place in Greece before inhabited by Hellenes, so they're talking 1000, 1200 BC, had a population of these people called Lasagians, and they were Aborigines who occupied this land. Before that, there was a moon, and that was recorded in their ancient texts. They were living when there was a moon in the sky above the earth. I think that was around about 10,000 years ago. There's another famous person, Greek, Apollonius of Rhodes. He mentioned at the time when not all the orbs were yet in the heavens. He's a bit of an amateur astronomer. And then we have recorded information from these various races, the Deucalion and the Denai, and the Arcadians. They said they dwelt on mountains and fed on acorns before there was a moon. So there's, quite a variety of information, and once you start digging into it. Ovid, the famous poet, mentions the Arcadians said possessed their land before the birth of Jove, and the folk is older than the moon. It's written translated from Latin. So, in the Old Testament, in Job, the grandeur of the Lord who makes peace in the heights is praised, and the time is mentioned before there was a moon and it did not shine. There's a number of instances in the Old Testament where that was mentioned. There's also in Psalm, thou wast feared since the time of the sun and before the time of the moon, a generation of generations. So we're talking, I think, for what I gathered from our work from some years ago, although I've been out of it a few years, we're talking about 50,000 years ago when this was towed in. The Indians of the Highlands and Eastern Colombia, they also, in their ancient texts, relate of tribals times before there was a moon. And in the earliest times when the moon was not yet in heaven, which they record in their ancient forefathers. Interesting. And then we come to the more modern. You've probably heard of Dr. Wolf and Dr. Boylan. They're all, Dr. Boylan is a very keen UFO follower. I've lost touch with him for a few years now. Dr. Wolf was a NASA advisor. He died, I think, of cancer about 7 years ago. He mentioned an extraterrestrial space beacon. They dubbed it the Monolith, which was retrieved from a US military spacecraft and brought back to Earth in 1972. I don't know if you knew about that, but Wolf declared that the moon is artificial, long ago positioned in its orbit by extraterrestrials, and furthermore he confirmed to Dr. Wolf that there is an extraterrestrial base on the moon, and when Wolf suggested it was on the dark side, he did not challenge that assumption. the monolith is quite interesting because it said that apparently, according to Dr. Wolf, there were 7 scientists working on it, and one of them was Carl Sagan. Carl Sagan was very quiet about it. Incidentally, all 7 scientists died of cancer working on this monolith. It was so radiated they had to work underwater eventually. But of course, in those days, they weren't too, health and safety wasn't that brilliant like today. But Carl never really mentioned too much. He made a few snippets to it, but I think he was trying to get his cosmos theories into being, and he kept that very quiet. The information we got was from Dr. Wolf. So another interesting confirmation, if you like, independent information. And this is not the monolith, but this is one of the radar telescopic images from one of the spacecraft from overlooking the moon from about early 90s, I think. We put it in one of our books, and this was seen probably several hundred meters up, from what I gather, but no one knows what it is. No one has actually looked into it. It's just a terrestrial image of the moon taken from one of the NASA spacecraft. We did write to the master, but obviously didn't. But NASA, they used to call it, is never a straight answer, so you never get anything anyway off them. So that actually brings us on to our solar anomalies. Are there any questions so far? I'm flashing through this, but there's a lot of information. If you want me to explain anything or for me to go over later, by all means we will. But if there's any questions you want to ask, feel free to shout at any time. I'm going to do we're going to break in 5 minutes? 10 minutes? Yeah. I'll start on this and we have a break so your brains won't be too fried. I try to give you a lot of pictures on this one, but solar anomalies, this is taken from, just to give you an example, this is taken in 2000. We started following this, I started following in 1999, with a group of 14 people. And one of the group coined a phrase, the solar cruiser. It's been going on. This is one here. Now, when the planets transit across the sun, you can see it for about a week. Mars, Venus, they often, every now and again, you transit across. So you can actually see it going across the front of the sun, and you can follow it for 7 or 8 days. These appear and disappear well, usually lasting 30 minutes and dematerialize again. It's not a glitch in the camera. We've taken thousands of captures of these. This is one of the I don't know if you're familiar with the LASCO and the EIT and the infrared telescopes. They've got a couple of million miles up in the atmosphere taking pictures constantly of the sun. This is a protective corona. The satellite is held here and the sun is behind it. This one's a little bit nearer than the blue one you see, which is C2. So these are just telescopes going around taking photographs. These are EIT ones. They show infrared without, because they've got protective lens. You can show them colour. And that's another one that was taken recently. So you've got some idea what we're looking at. And the LASCO is, it means LASCO C2. This is the one I really like because you see a lot, it's much nearer the sun, it's more exploded than the blue one. It's called the Large Angle Spectrum NASA, and you find all these pictures. There was a time, this is LASCO 2, C2 as we call them. This is the transitory planet. It's the sort of thing you see. That's probably, it might be Venus. It takes about 7 or 8 days to pass. It goes along slowly like that. So every day you see it. The sun is behind here. This is held an occlusion disk on the telescope to prevent the glare. Often when there's massive solar flares, there's quite a lot of activity around there, and it does affect the camera. But this gives you some idea. So this is the occulter holder, the pylon. This is the sun behind it. That's the disk, and these are all the streams coming out of solar eruptions. This is one, when was that taken? 2000. And the interesting thing with the S.U.F.O.N, I'll ask you, it gives you exactly the time and the date. So that was 2018 evening, and 19th of the 1st, 2000. This one here, we eventually called them the solar cruisers. They were called Anomalies at first, but someone designated that because, and they are large, I mean they're huge. Some of them are half planet size. They just materialize and dematerialize, but there's always some reaction with the sun at the time. Either it comes during the reaction or it causes a reaction. We can never tell, and often there's 2 or 3 appear at the same time.
What sort of duration is those exposures?
Sorry?
What sort of duration?
They come in for about 25-30 minutes.
No, of the exposure, I mean, to get the photograph.
Oh, I'm not quite. These are the real-time images. It's taken all the time.
Is it like a split second, or is it the exposure? I mean,
probably every 3 minutes, something like that.
Is it just a split second in the? Is the photograph?
I think so. Yeah.
So I notice they've all got little streaks, like white lines.
Yeah.
Something's moving.
Yeah. Well, I'll come to that. Some have got very large ones, and I think it's. From what I understand, some of the newer spectrograms, it's more than a split second. It's going for many seconds, and there are actually videos, continuous videos available. But I think those were just the camera just shoots off all the time automatically. But in the other ones I'll show you, these are much longer. This is just an example. See if I got another one. This is a close-up in 2002. From the EIT one, in 2001 they brought these infrared pictures in. It's an unusual right there, and this is the sort of shape it is. But they are large. This is the sun. They probably are, I would say, about 1 million miles, 2 million miles from the sun. Someone suggested it could be, one of the teams suggested it could be a sort of vibrationary appearance and then vibrate out. They don't, the heat won't affect it. Others suggested it isn't that hot at all. So, you know, who knows? And these are closer up shots, so that's why they call them solar cruisers, because these look like a cruiser craft. I've got some better ones than that, but we've got literally thousands and thousands of these photographs. These are all captured by various people in the group over the years. And there's another one there, just on the outskirts of the C2. Often when these appear, this happens, or they appear while it's happening. Large CMEs, coronal mass ejections. And one theory was either when it appears and they reappear, they're using the energy for somehow to reboot up, or they're causing it to have the energy. We'll look at some more interesting pictures soon. And this was another one. That one you're going to see now was taken around about here. Very unusual. It was a triangular-shaped craft with all these little spheres around it. We never did find out what that was. But
what we're doing?
Sorry?
Changing the sun.
Oh yeah, because that occurred. One of those occurred after it. So interesting. And often you find that NASA, when there's something really interesting, they either shut it all down, or they start putting in these little squares to cover all the action up. Very unusual formation there. Because when we used to write to them, we gave up after a while. It was just camera glitches, you know, something in the digital image, but it's really unusual. And this is, I'll finish on this one and have a break, but this is what happened. We called it the Stargate effect. In 1999, this appeared for about several hours until NASA got to know of it and shut it down. You see in here? We don't know what it was, but this is a close-up of it.
What date was that?
Huge. Well, it's huge. I mean, the sun is here. Whether it was some kind of wormhole, whether it was some kind of energy drift, no one really knows. But for about 6 months there was talk of many radio shows, and it was actually the lady who captured this image for us has died now, but Rusty, we used to call her, Rusty Rutherford, she had paralysed, she couldn't really get out of the house much, so she spent all her energies just looking 24 hours basically at all these. Once she got to know them, she spent 5 years copying all these images and following all the work. So she used to capture them and find them before NASA got hold of them. So we were lucky to get these shots, otherwise we missed them. That was the famous Stargate 99. Anyway, I'll leave it there because we don't want to clutter up with too much information. We'll finish that off after a break, and then I'll go on to the Fermi paradox, and we'll need some clear heads then. So, any questions, by the way, before we go any further?
Yeah, just wondering if a lot of these anomalies, if they are sort of perhaps work comes about it, or closing, what better place than near the sun, because they're hidden by the glare of the sun.
That's right.
Nobody knew to detect them.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's been suggested that either A, and you'll see with my sightings later on, the possibilities that it might be. But it was either A, the sun, there was a theory the sun isn't that hot when you get right up close to it, it's only in certain areas. B, that the craft somehow have some kind of heat shield. Or C, it's an interdimensional approach where they can be seen, but actually they're not there. You know, and I'll show you a picture I took in Uplands, how that kind of effect can be. So it's quite simple. So anyway, but we'll leave that for now. Any other questions?
I look forward to the second half. Look, thank you.
Can I just ask one? Can I just ask one question? You mentioned about the moon.
Yes.
Would you suggest that the moon is entirely artificial, or would you suggest that that it's a hollowed out planet, or something like that?
A lot of people say it's possible it's a natural rock, but being hollowed out.
Yeah.
I might go with that one, but I was a bit dubious at first, obviously.
Yeah.
But then when so many people I met when I went to Canada, quite reliable, well-known people told me that they knew all this as well. But it was 50-50 about whether it was a natural solid rock or hollow. But it originally was a solid and being hollowed out.
Apparently, when the NASA astronauts landed on the moon, I'm not sure which mission it was, when they landed down, they reckoned that the moon rung like a bell.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So it's geomagnetic.
Yeah.
The whole thing is a magnetic thing. I know to believe Duncan Rhodes, who runs Nexus, is a firm believer they never actually landed at that mission. But I think they landed there sometime, but I don't think they landed on the year that they first landed. The energy from the sun to power something up gigantuous, or whether it was actually forcing something into the sun, we're not too sure, but we know that it causes this sort of thing after. This is another one from C2. You can see the disk and the hole are there. This is just a transitory planet. The next one is EIT, the infrared ones. These sort of things appear. Now these trails I mentioned, I got one longer. Some of them are thousands of miles long. I don't think it's the camera. Some are there, some are not. When there's activity on the sun, these trails are elongated. There's some kind of energy. It's difficult from this photograph, but I think this is actually going into the sun, this trail, from what I've seen. There's another one there. I think I've got a closer one. This is a close-up of that. As you can see, there's no trail on that one, but as soon as activity starts, or any flares come up, they throw out this. There's one here. Look. Now this one, interesting, this one's in an opposite direction. But if you analyse that, if I look, it's similar to this on a smaller scale. If you take some of the, I haven't got some of the big enlargements, Rusty had quite a few. She did this one, this is something else, this is another one, this is a close-up of that, on this one here, on another frame, coming in here. And something at the end of it, some sphere. This is a very high-res close-up. Bearing in mind this, tens of thousands of miles possibly.
What causes that horizontal line across the object? Is it that was on a transit of the planet as well?
I mean, hit this.
The
Yes,
horizontal line.
well, if you look, I got it. I think that's the actual shape of it. That is the shape.
Because it shows up like that. You said it was a transit of a planet.
Yes, it does show, doesn't it?
It's got a long line on that as well.
The NASA said it's a glitch in the digitals, but not that size. And also, I got some. There's another one heading towards. That one caused a very large explosion. That one I think was something different. That's the sort of thing that occurs. But I'm looking for the one you mentioned. There's another one here, up and down, causing this to happen. Every time something appears like this, something is a reaction in the sun. It's very much like a comet going into the sun. Once a comet goes there, you have this major reaction. I'm looking for some close-ups again. I'm looking for a close-up of this, because you can sort of see they've all got these. I can understand if it was like occasionally a digital glitch on either side, but these seem quite. I haven't got the image, but there's a very good close-up. It looks like something out of Star Trek. The where is it here? It's like this, or in more defined shape. Maybe next time, if I come again, I'll add that on. So anyway, basically, what we come to the conclusion is either A, these craft were reappearing and dematerializing using the energy from the sun for some reason, or causing the disturbance of solar flares, either for their own use or for some unknown use, which we're not aware of. But without fail, all the ones that have thousands of these images captured, this always happens prior to or after the visit. So it's something to think about, and maybe something you can go back and look at the SOHO satellite telescopes and have a regular. You can get apps now. You get the app I used to have it on my iPhone. You can watch it all the time on your iPhone.
What's the time period between the photograph being taken and actually ending up on the internet?
It's live.
It's live.
It's live, and that's the problem, because now if you're not watching it continuously or group of you, you'll miss something, and that's why Rusty and all the others were able to capture these images, because NASA will either take it down or put in these. I think I showed you. Where is it? They put in these things here. They say it's a glitch on the telescope, and often you see these out here, all around here, dotted. They missed that one, but I really don't know what that was. There's something there, and it got caught in the flare, because it's starting to go around it. There's obviously some kind of solid magic. Otherwise, that would shoot
I've
off.
seen the one on the internet. It's like a big black disk circle, and it seems to be sucking a whole part of the sun off. And it's like an elastic snap, and it shoots off.
If you won't plan the UFOs, you don't plan them.
Whatever it is, it's massive because it's right next to the sun. It's huge.
Well, there's a lot, two big groups now forming. I am in touch with them because they use a lot of our original material. They started 2 years ago, and I'll try and get the links. I'll pass them to you, because they're following it all the time. And they've got a lot of new equipment now.
Yeah, but you can put the link up on our Facebook.
Yeah, okay. Bear in mind, we had quite sort of old equipment in those days. But now, of course, things have advanced quite a bit. And of course, the other thing with this is that we all know the new Labour leader, Corbyn. His brother, Piers Corbyn, is a big follower of the solar anomalies and solar. And in fact, I noticed, because I'm in touch with him on Facebook, because he saw our work some time ago. He's an astrophysicist, Piers Corbyn. You look him up on. He runs a paid weather site. And I think what he's doing now, he's putting up like 50 hits a day now with I think since his brother's got in, he's trying to put in a bid to buy to contract the BBC weather, because Met obviously not going to do it anymore. So I think he's putting in a bid for it. And I think he's hoping his brother's going to pull the strings. But his theory is that all the unusual weather we're having is all connected to the sun. And anything that you're probably aware, or you may not be aware, that every time there's these large, I've got another one. Every time these large coronal mass ejections, CMEs, occur, within 48, 72 hours, it affects the Earth geomagnetically if it's Earth directed. Most of them are, and that's why you see a lot of the aurora lights going on, and quite some were down as far south recently. But not only that, when this happens and it's Earth directed, 99.9% I can tell you there's going to be a big earthquake somewhere on the planet. Because without fail, every time there's a large Earth-directed CME, within 72 hours or prior to, because it causes a geomagnetic effect on the planet, and our geomagnetic protection is wearing down quite a lot. There's always large sections of earthquake. That one in recently, last week, 8.3, there was a large CME just before that. So you keep an eye out. If you see a CME and it's Earth-directed, you go on to space.com. It'll show you if it's Earth-directed. Then in 2 days, you watch out for earthquakes.
I think I saw a program. It said there is a hole in the magnetosphere.
Yeah, it's wearing down. Our magnetic covering has been wearing down for hundreds of years. I think it's got worse in the last 20, 30 years. So it's like, I haven't got a picture, but you can go online and watch it. It shows you the sort of the effect of the CME as it comes towards Earth. It's actually, if you look at it, it's quite frightening. It's like it's going to burn up the Earth, and it goes around like that. But so far, we've got our geomagnetic protection in place, but that's going so thin now that we're getting all these. That's why we get a lot of earthquakes. And I noticed in the last 6 months we've had loads of earthquakes, quite big ones too.
Can I offer a slant on that?
Yes,
if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Project HARP. I don't know if anybody's
Yes, I
heard
know
of
about
that.
HARP, yeah.
Where they're supposed to manipulate
Where
weather
angels fear
patterns.
to tread. Yeah.
Okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe you got the both going on at the same time. Maybe?
Yes,
I don't
the thing
know.
with HARP, it can be directed. They can direct weather. And there's a guy called Harry Rhodes. You get him on Facebook. He's on about the chemtrailing and the HARP.
Yeah, the chemtrailing and HARP.
We looked into that 15 years ago. HARP was well involved in that because the chemtrails were covered with aluminium, and with the HARP you get a reflective and geomagnetic effect. And then we had all those strands appearing. Nobody did find out about that.
But the chemtrails, I don't know if anybody's noticed, over the last few weeks there's been very few chemtrails.
Yeah.
There's been lots of trails, but they dissipate very quickly.
Yes,
like
that's
it
right,
always
yeah.
happens since my childhood, I remember.
Yeah.
Through the summer, they've been spreading out, and then you
That's
get
right.
a cloudy sky.
That's right.
If
Yeah.
you
didn't
we haven't
know.
seen it for weeks, and then last night
There was I
Usually
saw
on start on a
chemtrails
clear
last
day.
night,
Yeah.
and they weren't going away.
No, they're just spreading out, and then.
And they're not
I've actually
Yeah.
I got a photograph of one when you could show. 8 years ago, I photographed one with a big lens. You could actually see the trail of chemtrails coming up, not of the engine, but a tank underneath. Now, apparently, there's a big talk of airlines actually trailing in passenger jets. And I think the Irish company, not EasyJet, what's the other one?
Yeah.
They've been slammed. Harry Rose wants to get answers from whether he said the CE knows about it or has been put in the fuel. They should find out. But it's causing a lot of not just weather alterations, and of course the Russians do this in the 50s, but illnesses all over the planet. And there's some bizarre answers to why that's happening as well. That's another story. But, okay, I'm going to talk now, the last section. Be pleased to know about, we can get on with the Fermi paradox as well, about my sighting in 1965. And when I showed you those solar anomalies, it might tie up on what this might be. Because in November 1965, this is how the hospital looks today. the anomaly, I call it anomaly, it was in count, it was about 200 foot above it, and it was larger than the hospital. And the first, I'll just go on a slide for a second. I'll come back to this. I just want to show you something. This is the sports, University Sports Centre in 1965. I actually lived there for 10 years. My father was the playing fields manager for all playing fields at university, and all upstairs was our apartment. And on the side there is my room, and I actually looked out the window. I can see it across there. So what happened was, the first thing I noticed is a feeling. I looked out the window and I saw this huge black fat cigar shape over this hospital. But the other thing I noticed, all the lights were flashing on and off consistently. And apparently that was in the paper a couple of days later about an incident in the Singleton Hospital where lights were going on and off and no one found out, couldn't understand what was happening. And the craft I saw was so the same size, and if not bigger, 100 foot above it. If you were in the hospital grounds, you wouldn't see it because the building would be in the way. But I was at an angle 200 yards, 150 yards, so I could see it all. So it reminded me, this was 1972, was Close Encounters, third kind, this happened in 65. But looking back on it, it sort of reminded me of that, with all the lights flashing on and off in unison. Looking back now with hindsight, probably charging up, whatever the technology we're doing. This actually is showing the size of it. It looked exactly like that, it was just black, a black void, a metal object, or whatever it was, hanging over the hospital. And this is the view I had from here. It was quite big. And I didn't see it, I watched it, I went downstairs and I saw it from the window and I went downstairs to see actually if it was still there because I thought it might be something from the window. By the time I got there, there were 4 or 5 other people that stopped in the lane. In those days it was a lane, it wasn't a highway like today, and the street lights weren't the neon ones, they were like 200 watts pointing down. So there's no light pollution apart from the lights in the hospital. This is how it looks today. It's a large, the Sketty Lane was quite narrow in those days. So this was my room, and I was looking straight across and saw that. And then we came out and stood here. 2 cars had stopped. They'd already seen it. So that's basically what I saw for about 25 minutes. This is a picture I took in '64 to show you the building of the hospital. That's how small. It was just a lane. We just passed 2 cars in those days. This actually is the Weavers. Do you remember the Weavers dock? This was a demonstration of I took some pictures of it. They had to pull it down. The first precast concrete building in the world. They don't pull it down. Don't even yeah. Anyway, so this is an aerial view. Good job for Google. But this is where it was, right over this area here. Sports centres here, and that's what it looked like. So we watched it for about 20 minutes, and all of a sudden a little green dot appeared in the middle, and eventually this happened. I presume it went all the way around. I could only see one side of it. You're probably talking, if it was about 100 foot up, you're probably talking something, the hospital is about, I don't know, 200 metres long or something. It's quite long. So it's much bigger because it's 150 foot up or so. All of a sudden, this little window appeared, and this green light appeared, and it was like going around. It was flashing like it was a neon light. And then all of a sudden, it just did that. Just disappeared. It was a slight. The second floor disappeared was a slight shudder. And then dematerialized. There was no moving away, and it was solid, like it was hanging there, and then bang, it went. So either it had got some kind of natural, using a natural wormhole or a man-made, very common technology, down to a small box section, and used a combination from there. and use that. But I tried to get answers from astrophysicists, but they, even the Japanese guy, but I haven't had any word back on that. So if anybody's got some ideas apart from that, you know. But that's what we saw, and that stuck in my mind ever since. It's got something like that you never forget. So
you mentioned as well when you sent me the account, the space where it occupied.
Yes,
you couldn't see the stars.
No, after it disappeared, all that area was void, and after about 6 seconds, the stars appeared. So, and I offered all this information because I thought that this line, you know, as it materialised, would be some information to an astrophysicist or NASA working on it, you know, at the time. But no one seemed very interested. I understand that there is technology available, but it involves like something twice the size as building to get even started, you know. These, whoever had these, and it's bearing in mind it's like 65, if it was one of those, we should be going off well into the cosmic unknown by now, you know. So that was the sighting. I call it close encounter, probably the first kind. Of course, that wasn't turned until some years later, was it? The close encounters,
77,
72 or something like that.
77.
Was it?
I've
77.
got one of them on DVD.
Have you?
Yeah.
Oh, like that?
My real dad said this shit about that Uncle Fermi there a long time ago when you were younger.
Right.
Yeah,
I know that people in the Evening Post that month, unusual lights were seen over Town Hill. But this is nothing to, I don't think, maybe, I don't know, it's associated, but this is some high advanced technology, you know. It's very weird to suddenly dematerialise in front of you, that machine, that side. I think it was something, I was unfortunate I didn't see it arrive. But it couldn't have been there that long after I looked at it, because all the lights were flashing on and off. They were all using the power, because in 1965 that was the biggest building just being built in Swansea. So whoever arrived tracked the energy coming out of it, and it was like the car needs a battery charge. That they probably took the information, you know, and started up.
What time of night?
6 o'clock.
Was it?
It was dark.
Early.
Yeah, it was dark in November, so it was dark, but you couldn't miss this. And then when that green light appeared, you know.
And there was no noise, no vapor?
Nothing at all. Nothing at all. No humming. No, only a feeling in your head. Slight, you know, like a magnetic thing. It was, but there's no noise, nothing at all. And we were just standing. We actually walked up to the entrance hall and we was looking at it. And there was about 4 or 5 people by this time. They were older than me. I was only about 18 at the time. So they probably passed on now, but with hindsight, it would be good to try and get their versions of it. But I never heard, there was no other report made, you know, as far as I'm aware.
So you had the feeling in your head. Did that draw your attention?
Yes, I was actually studying for my A-levels. We had a sweet sick one of them. And I stopped up and something made me go to the window. And something like I looked out the window and I saw that, and I ran downstairs. Get near it. Yeah. So interesting. But it always stuck with me, and it's something that's never. But having learned a lot since then, I think it's that would be the answer. It's obviously used the technology and natural cosmic energies to power that craft. And it's surprising that no one, well, it doesn't surprise me now, but who's interested in research in NASA, that might have helped them to, you know, replicate in some way. But
There have been lots of cases of UFOs drawing energy from the power grid, causing blackouts. And,
oh yes.
In fact, there was in 1983 when there was a spate of the big black triangles.
Yes.
The night of the triangles, I call it, in Swansea.
Right, okay.
There was a blackout in the Bishopston area.
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
Well, wouldn't energy from something as primitive as that be just like a Duracell battery to them?
But you see, there's nothing, no lines or anything. They just used probably a Wi-Fi effect. they were just sucking up via Wi-Fi, you know, than we got now.
Yeah.
But, you know, who knows?
Because the only other theory I had, and you probably laugh at me for saying this, is that what I've heard is that interdimensionals use low vibrational human emotion to feed themselves. And where else are you going to get more low vibrational human emotion than a hospital?
Yeah, but whether the light's in that way as well, I don't know. But you know, it's a mystery, really. You know, we don't really. Yeah. We're only scratching the sand with a lot of things. Really. Yeah. Okay, that's talking about that. If I go on very quickly to the Fermi paradox, or as I call it, where the heck are they? Why aren't we seeing more activities? And we're talking about vibration, and you talked about earlier on frequencies as well. So we go into our, just about a bit of a background. It's quite interesting information. I don't want to dwell it too much, but just to give you some idea. The stars in our galaxy are uncountable, but they reckon it's up to 400 billion just in our galaxy alone. There's an equal number of galaxies in all the observable galaxies in the universe and beyond, and of course in the universe that we know. It could be 22, 24 universes, so they say. For every star in the Milky Way, there's a whole galaxy out there. And in the observable, in our known universe, for every grain of sand on Earth, there are 10,000 stars out there. So where is that? Where are they? You know, where are they? So potentially, what the scientists, this is not my, this is what the scientists say, astronomers, potentially having an Earth-like planet orbiting at least 1% of the total stars in the universe. So in other words, that if there was, we should see 100 billion Earth-like planets. But we're not. You know, well, we find them every now and again, I know, but you know. So in other words, there are 100 Earth-like planets for every grain of sand in the world. So incountable. You can't really measure that, really. In the Milky Way, there's 100 billion stars on the lower estimate, and 1 billion Earth-like planets, and 100,000 intelligent civilizations promoted in our galaxy as they can think of. In our galaxy alone. I mean, the problem is our sun has got a young sun. There are many other suns in other galaxies and our own that are much older than ours. So that's one answer probably. We're very young in this part of the world. And then I'm going to show you, I don't know if you know about the Great Filter, why no one bothers with us. The questions we can ask, are we rare? Are we unique? Or are we totally screwed? You know, are we the last remnants, you know?
They come down.
Or is the filter ahead of us? Are we yet to get to that filter when millions of others have already gone through it? And this is the Great Filter. We're down the bottom here somewhere, you know. These areas are what we know as evolutionary leaps over the thousands of years. Point of origin of is here. We're probably on the bottom rung of the ladder around here somewhere. So this what they say is the main filter. This is the evolutionary leap that many species don't manage to make it. And this is through the filter. We've got one species goes through via a freak event and gets into this section, and then you've got the higher type 3 civilization, and probably time you get to that, it's all in the brain, in the cosmic heavens. We probably don't need the physical attributes to carry on. So this is the Great Filter. We need to get through this is a theory anyway. We need to get through that filter, and vice versa, coming in. So basically, there are civilizations out there, we know that. It's just we haven't seen them. Recorded history is only 5,500 years, which is nothing. It's a grain of sand, really, isn't it? So there's a possibility that for millions of years that civilizations have visited, probably saw what was going on and shot straight off again. I don't blame them. The galaxy has been colonized in general, but these are options, all right? We just live in some desolate rural prison somewhere in the galaxy. Lost tribes have been found. We're still finding lost tribes and unusual animals and fauna in the sea. But the entire concept of a physical colonization is hilariously backward to an advanced species. So someone walking around like we're talking today, they would consider that a Reagan-Dooney because it's not what they understand. The entire physical world, what we're living in, is a primitive place. We're in a desert. Having long ago conquered their own biology and uploaded their brains to a virtual reality. So we're all living in this eternal life paradise on behalf of someone else. Remember the galaxy where they had to pull the Earth away for a super highway? Yeah. I didn't think of that one, yeah, exactly. So we could be part of an experiment. And one of Jim, my co-author, thought years ago that basically we did a deal with the Palladians 25,000 years ago. They turned sour and they left it to us. It's the prime directive, we don't want to get involved. And then we've got, we're on carbon-based life. There could be other forms of life out there we don't understand. It could be insectoid lives. We don't know. So the theory is that there could be some really scary predators, something like Alien and all his colleagues. The guy who wrote this has probably got more up his street there.
What about Bigfoot?
Yeah, yes, possible. But the idea being that they know better than to broadcast any outgoing signals to advertise their location. So that's maybe why you're not all this millions of dollars sent out looking for life in the universe. If they don't want to be found, they won't be found.
They're too timid.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not.
Nice
Unless they,
the other theory is there is only one instance of a higher intelligence, a super predator, like humans on Earth, who are far more advanced and keeping that way by exterminating any intelligent civilization once they get past this filter on a certain level. So who knows, 50 years time, we may get to a level and we'll all be wiped out. I don't know. It's just another theory that's, So there's plenty, to sum up, there's plenty of activity and noise out there, but our technology is too primitive. I'm listening.
Lincoln or Hart, that's what I'm getting at. Is actually, all over Britain and all over the world to the same extent or not?
Yeah, it's
just a question.
Yeah,
I think it is everywhere.
Yeah, I think actually it's quite frightening. Seriously.
Do you remember a film out many, many years ago?
Paul.
The guy, someone made these sunglasses.
They Live with Rowdy Roddy Piper.
Exactly, yeah, I think it's like that. If you could harness that energy or frequency by putting on the glasses or your brain, you could actually see many things around you, And I think that's what it is, and many people do see that. There's a very good example. An archaeological friend of mine was digging up in north of England about 10 years ago, and he was having a cup of tea with a builder who was doing up an old cottage, and the builder he used to do this every day for about a week or so. And one day the builder came out. He said, "I need a whiskey." And he said, "What's the trouble?" Well, he said, "I've just seen Roman soldiers march through the house." And he said, "Interesting." I said, "A camera, But my archaeological friend found out that this was a route 2,000 years ago. Of course, the cottage has only been there 200 years. A route of the soldiers, one of the legions going up north. And for some reason, a frequency vibration effect must have altered, and he got involved in this thing, and it affected him for a long time after that. But the interesting thing, he said they were like hovering off the floor, and some of them were below the floor, and I thought, yes, well that happened in Swindon once when the nuns were seen floating across, because the ground 300 years ago was higher or lower.
Climbing stairs are no longer there.
That's right. So it's all to do with frequency. So who knows?
Couldn't that be similar to the so-called ghost airplanes people have witnessed?
It's possible, yeah. It all boils down to frequencies, doesn't it? You know, just out of that slight vibration, slightly, because we're all made up of it.
Yeah.
We're all made up of molecules and frequencies.
What's this siren people have been hearing in Swansea?
Oh yeah. You live in that area, and you do.
What's that? Sorry.
It's more like a factory siren.
Oh, that's right. I heard about that on the radio.
It's like an old factory siren from about the 70s.
World War II.
Where it's like a high sort of pitched.
Is it all the time? Does it go up and down?
No, it's just that sort of pitch.
It's not like a
And it goes on for about 5-10 seconds. There's no real structure to the timing of it. It could come on like 11 o'clock in the morning.
It reminded me of the time when Concorde used to fly up the channel. 5 o'clock here, the British shape. Something's going on regular, but what I want to find out was, Colin, you hear that noise, the street cleaner noise? In the night you often hear this street cleaning type noise. It's in the air, it comes from the sea, I don't know where it comes from. It just sounds like a street cleaner. It's not a street cleaner, but it's that low rumbling noise. And it's heard on the west coast of America as well. People are hearing it all the time.
Find it like a hum.
Yeah.
It's like a peaceful quiet. There's no hardly any traffic. It's like a...
Yeah, it's a bit like that. Yeah. It's some kind of vibration thing, but I don't know what it is.
You just send me that information.
Yeah.
You send it to me.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Looks like that.
But I say you can't be so like, 10 o'clock. It's a siren.
Yeah, so they say, yeah.
It's only happened for about a year, last year and a half. It's never been there. And no one can sort of pinpoint where it is, which is quite weird. You've got the industrial estate, and you think that so many people there be spotted, especially if you've got people listening. You had somebody in the post or listen to it, and they didn't know this is what it is. But that was more than alarm. But it was
What was that? Oh yeah, Captain Birds.
Do anybody think that dreams are significant? Do you think dreams are significant? Is there?
What do you think that is?
I don't know, what's that?
Well, I had a very weird dream.
Entering for UFOs, North Pole.
It's what, sorry?
Entering for UFOs, North Pole.
An entrance to a UFO?
It's all descending as a chaos. Is there any more questions for Howard?